My favorite roller coaster in Austria is about to close forever, and I'm really sad. Fantasiana, just outside of Salzburg, is home to a one-of-a-kind wild train built by Russian manufacturer Pax. They're primarily known for these off-the-shelf layouts that can be found in countries like Russia and the Ukraine, but for whatever reason, they built a custom one at Fantasiana in 2005. So it's been operating for almost 20 years, set to close on October 31st, 2024. They're doing this so they can install a mock ride striker coaster called Helios. We had the opportunity to visit Fantasiana in the summer 2024 so we could get our one and only rides on the wild train before it closed. And we could actually see some of the work being done for Helios, including the installation of new footers that would stretch beyond the boundaries of the wild train. But this ride is located right at the front of the park, so this was the signature ride here for many, many years. And objectively, upgrading to a mock ride striker coaster is an awesome move, but I'm not gonna lie, I wish they could add a striker coaster without having to take this thing out, because I was so surprised at the power and airtime that this thing provided. And it sounds ridiculous, believe me, because you guys are seeing this footage, you're seeing that this thing is effectively the size of a kid's coaster. It's 60 feet tall, top speed 30 miles per hour, less than 1,000 feet of track. So nothing about the stats are impressive at all. It is the profiling that makes this thing stand out. The people who designed this did not give a crap. They're like, yeah, we'll just eject all these kids out of their seat in some of the most aggressive hills ever built. Fantasiana is effectively a kids park, like it's designed for families. And while I certainly saw kids riding the wild train, I couldn't help but feel like this ride felt a little out of place being here. It more felt like something you'd find at like Wiener Prater, which is another big park in Austria. They have rides of all shapes and sizes, so I'd be very curious in knowing why Fantasiana decided to build this ride specifically, and why they went for a custom layout, because most of the wild train roller coasters that are still operating are all of the same layout. We actually got to experience one the year prior at Parc St. Paul in France. And it was solid. I mean, honestly, it was better than we expected. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of forgettable. Nothing overly remarkable about it. The same could not be said about Wild Train at Fantasiana. In fact, I wish this was the layout that PAX decided to clone and send everywhere, because then I'd really start seeking these out. Like, guys, trust me, take a ride on a Wild Train. You'll be surprised. And that's coming from someone that likes being tossed around. You have to understand, going into this ride, it is aggressive. And so for that reason, it might not be for everyone. It's one of those roller coasters that you look at and you're like, yeah, that's going to be janky, but in a fun way. I was able to get, I think, 4 laps in on Wild Train, sitting all over in the front, back. I fully expected to like the back more, but actually the front ended up being my favorite, specifically for some of the hills at the end. Wild Train gets better as the layout progresses. So let's walk through these specific moments. First, we have a quick drive tire lift hill up to the top. It's this lift hill that is probably the single reason why the ride is about to close. The drive tires are super sensitive to water. They can't be wet at all, or else the train has a risk of slipping. There's no traditional anti-rollbacks here. So Fantasiana won't operate the ride in the rain, which ended up screwing us over for a bit because the first half of our day had a light drizzle, and they would not run it until it had completely stopped. It was a little excessive, and any ride that is that sensitive to literally a couple droplets of water probably shouldn't be operating, so I get it. You'll crest over onto a flat section of track. This is facing the front gate, and you'll take a very tight dive to the right in your first drop. Now, there's nothing overly crazy about this drop. This isn't really where the airtime starts, but in the back, it is surprising how quickly you rotate around this center column. It has quite a bit of whip to it, and then you just swiftly enter your first airtime hill. And this is good, but it's not amazing. Remember what I said, the ride gets better as it goes along. And there's no sense or rhyme or reason why Wild Train decides to do this next element, but for some reason they put the helix at the start of the ride instead of at the end. Usually that's a last resort, but here it's actually an upwards helix wrapping around the center column. You're able to walk directly underneath it. Our friend Tanner said it reminded him of how you could look straight up at the Flying Ace aerial chase helix, which is quite literally a kid's coaster. I would argue this looks even smaller, but it pulls some decent G-forces, I'll admit. In the back row, the drop off the helix is pretty sharp, but this is where things get crazy. This is what we call the El Toro Hill. If you're unfamiliar with El Toro, this is an intimate, prefabricated wooden roller coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure, and it has these airtime hills that are just so powerful. You just launch up out of your seat. You can see how the ascent up into the hill and dropping down off of it is just so steep. Your legs are pressed up against that lap bar, and this hill looks strangely similar to it. I mean, granted, significantly smaller and also steel, not wood. This element is nuts. The way you just suddenly go from being firmly planted in your seat to now about as far away from the bottom of the seat as possible without, flying out is wildly impressive. It's about there when you're really glad that lap bar is secure and that you have that additional seatbelt, because wow, that is a lot. I think I personally preferred this hill in the front row, but dropping off of it in the back was incredible. I think it's this single hill that made this ride known among coaster enthusiasts, but you could make an argument it's not even the best moment of the ride. Immediately after this hill, there's a sideways banked airtime pop as you start to make your turnaround. It's pretty much an off-axis hill. This part is decent. I really like this drop that follows though. When you sit in the back, you just get taken away. You are a ragdoll. Don't try and resist, just let it do its thing. It does this airtime pop over the final section of track that goes into the brake run, aka also the station, and it's winding around itself, so you have a head chopper moment with a piece of track going overhead. And you rise back up, getting ejected up into the air, banking to the right. That part is so powerful. I love that moment specifically towards the front. And then there's a half helix, a hill that'll rotate you from the right to the left. You'll bank around and enter just a slight little airtime pop into the brake run. You are back where you started. The station is the brakes. It is a short ride, but it is a memorable one. I came off with a huge smile on my face and laughed throughout the entire ride course. And really, that's all the indicator you need to know. It's just plain fun. It's such an utterly ridiculous experience being smushed into this tiny car and then getting yeeted out of your seat over and over again. It's just comical. But I think it also depends a bit on your pain tolerance, because repeatedly getting thrown up into your lap bar might be too much for some people. If you prefer that feeling of gradually being lifted up out of your seat, gently floating there, yeah, you won't find that here. This thing tries to throw you out of your seat. And if you didn't know anything going in, I could see how this ride would catch a lot of people off guard. What can I say other than looks can be deceiving? So for Wild Train's final score, I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10. It's one of my favorite roller coasters around this size, and I will dearly miss it. I really wish that this ride would get relocated, like another park buys it up, but it might be more trouble than it's worth. It's already been operating for almost 20 years. Who knows how much time it has left in its service life, but it is a gem of a coaster, that is for sure. I'm so glad I got to experience it, but I also welcome the brand new Mach Striker coaster for 2025. I'm sure it'll be great. So let me know down in the comments below if you've experienced Wild Train at Fantasiana, if you agree with the points that I brought up, and stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.